The file weighs 11 ounces. You know this because you waited on the postal scale in the copy room at 4 in the morning when the building was empty and the night shift had finished their round and the cameras on the east corridor had their 18-second gap that you had been mapping for 6 weeks without knowing why you were mapping it until the night you needed it. 11 ounces. 43 pages. A classification level that does not have a public name because the category itself is classified. You have handled top-secret material for 9 years. You have handled compartmented material. You have handled documents that required two-person protocols and biometric access, and rooms with no windows and phone's integrity left outside the door. You have never handled anything at this level. There are 14 people in the United States military apparatus with authorization to access what you are holding. You are not one of them. You accessed it anyway. And now you are walking to your car in a parking structure in Virginia at 4:17 in the morning with 11 ounces of the most protected information in the history of American national security folded inside a courier bag that you bought with cash from a shop in Maryland 3 weeks ago. You don't run. Running is what people do in movies when they have done what you have done. You walk. Steadily. The walk of someone who belongs in a parking structure at 4 in the morning because their shift runs late and the commute is long and this is simply Tuesday. You reach your car. You put the bag on the passenger seat. You drive out of the structure and onto the highway and into the dark, and you do not look in the rearview mirror because looking in the rearview mirror is also what people do in movies, and you have spent 9 years learning that the difference between operational success and operational failure is the discipline to not perform the thing you feel like doing. You drive north. The file sits in 11 ounces of silence on the seat next to you. You think about what is inside it. You think about why you took it. You think about the 18-second camera gap and the postal scale and 6 weeks of preparation that felt, while you were doing it, like something other than what it was. Then you think about what happens when they find it missing, which will be in approximately 4 hours. You drive faster. Chapter 1. The 9 years before. You were good at this work. This matters as context. You were not the disgruntled employee, not the ideological convert, not the person building grievances across years until the grievances required an action. You were genuinely good at the work and the work genuinely mattered to you, and for 9 years those two facts produced a career that your superiors described in reviews as exceptional, and that you experienced as the closest thing to purpose you had found in a life that had been looking for it since you were 19 years old and walked into a recruiter's office in Ohio because you needed something to be about. You have a clearance that took 14 months to obtain and that you maintained throughout 9 years without a single flag. You have a commendation from a joint operation in 2019 that you cannot describe to anyone outside the compartment. You have a supervisor named Colonel Marsh who trusted you with increasing levels of access across 3 years because trust in this environment is built through the slow accumulation of small reliabilities, and you were reliably precise and reliably discreet and reliably present in the way that matters most inside classified work. You were someone who understood that what you knew had weight and treated the weight accordingly. Then 14 weeks ago you were assigned to a records audit. Standard procedure. Classification review. Documents reaching the end of their designated restricted period being assessed for potential downgrade or continued classification. Routine work. The kind of work assigned to someone reliable precisely because reliable people do not look at things they are not supposed to look at. You looked at something you were not supposed to look at. Not deliberately. An access error in the audit database. A file that appeared in your queue that should not have appeared in your queue. You opened it before you understood what you were opening. By the time you understood, you had read 4 pages. By the time you had closed it and logged out and sat very still in a room with no windows for 11 minutes, you had understood that the 4 pages described something that required the remaining 39 pages to fully understand, and that the full comprehension of it would mean that 9 years of believing the work mattered was either confirmed or destroyed depending on which 39 pages said. You went back. You read the rest. You sat with it for 6 weeks. Then you took it. Chapter 2. What the file contains. You are not going to tell anyone what the file contains. This is the decision you made on the highway driving north, and it is the decision that separates what you are doing from what they will say you are doing when they find it missing. They will say espionage. They will say treason. They will use the language of betrayal because the language of betrayal is what the institution reaches for when someone takes something the institution wanted kept. But betrayal requires a transfer, and you have not transferred anything to anyone, and you do not intend to. What you intend is more complicated and less filmable than espionage. What you intend requires the file to exist somewhere outside the system that produced it for long enough that the people whose names appear in it cannot make the file itself disappear before anyone outside the 14 authorized people knows it existed. You drive to a motel in Pennsylvania that you paid for with cash 6 weeks ago under a name that is not your name, but that has a credit history you built over 18 months through a service that does this kind of thing for people who need this kind of thing, and that you found through a contact you cultivated carefully and at considerable patience in a year before you read the 4 accidental pages. You check in. You go to the room. You put the bag on the bed. You sit in the chair by the window and you look at the bag for a long time. 9 years. The commendation. Colonel Marsh's specific trust. The 14 months of clearance investigation during which someone examined your entire life and found it acceptable. You think about all of it, and you think about the 39 pages, and you think about the names in the 39 pages, and you think about what it means that those names are there, and what it means that you know they are there, and what it means that you took the file rather than reported what you found, because reporting what you found to anyone inside the system means reporting it to people who may be connected to the names, and the names cannot know you know about the names until it is too late for the names to do anything about it. This is not paranoia. You spent 9 years learning to distinguish paranoia from accurate threat assessment. What you have is accurate threat assessment. The distinction keeps you in the chair by the window rather than calling Colonel Marsh. Chapter 3. The 48 Hours. They find it missing in 4 hours and 20 minutes. You know this because at 9:14 in the morning your personal phone receives a call from a number you recognize as a colleague whose calls you have always answered. You don't answer. You turn the phone off. You have a second phone, clean, purchased with cash, that you use to monitor 3 specific news aggregators and 2 government-adjacent feeds that update when things move in the classified space in ways that produce observable ripples in public-adjacent information. The ripples begin at 11. Small. The kind of movement that looks like nothing if you do not know what movement in this space looks like. You know. By 2 in the afternoon you know that the search is active and that it is being run at a level that means the file's contents are understood to be the reason for the taking rather than the taking itself being the primary concern. This tells you they know what is in the file. It also tells you they know what you know. The distinction between those 2 things is where your safety currently lives. You make 3 calls from the clean phone. The first is to a lawyer whose name you found 8 months ago and whose practice includes a specific category of national security whistleblower representation that most lawyers do not advertise and that you found through the kind of research that looks, in retrospect, like preparation and that felt, while you were doing it, like contingency planning for a situation you were not yet certain you would create. The lawyer answers. You say 4 words. You say I have the file. The silence that follows is 3 seconds long and contains everything you need to know about whether this lawyer understands the weight of what you just said. The silence tells you she does. The second call is to a journalist. The third call is to your sister in Ohio who does not know anything about anything and who you call because she is your sister and because the specific uncertainty of the next 72 hours requires hearing a voice that exists completely outside everything else, and your sister's voice has always been that. She asks how you are. You say fine. She talks about her kids for 6 minutes. You listen to every word. Then you say you love her. She says it back. You hang up. You go back to the window. The file is on the bed. 11 ounces. 43 pages. The weight of it filling the room in a way that has nothing to do with the postal scale. Chapter 4. What you traded. The lawyer's name is Patricia Wren and she arrives at the motel in Pennsylvania at 7 in the evening and she sits across from you and she asks to see the file before she asks anything else. You show her 4 pages. Not the most significant 4. The 4 that establish context without providing the complete picture, because the complete picture is the only leverage you have and leverage shared completely is leverage surrendered. She reads them. She puts them down. She looks at you with the expression of someone recalibrating the size of a problem they had already assessed as large. She tells you your options. There are 3. The first involves a formal whistleblower submission through a channel that has statutory protection, but that requires surrendering the file to a process you cannot control once you enter it. The second involves the journalist and a publication timeline that protects you through exposure rather than process, making the file's contents public before the names in the file can activate whatever they would activate to prevent publication. The third involves returning the file and negotiating terms that she is honest enough to tell you are unlikely to include anything you would accept. You tell her the second option. She nods without surprise. She has a publication contact already. You understand she has done this before. This is both reassuring and clarifying about the specific nature of the world you have entered, the world where the most classified file in U.S. military history sits on a motel bed in Pennsylvania, while a lawyer and a former intelligence professional discuss publication timelines by the light of a window overlooking a parking lot. You think about what you traded. The 9 years. The commendation. Colonel Marsh's trust, which was real and which you valued, and which is now the specific casualty of what the 39 pages required you to do with it. You think about your sister's voice on the phone. You think about Ohio and the recruiter's office and 19 years old and need something to be about. Chapter 5. The morning after. The story publishes at 6 in the morning on a Thursday. You are in a different motel in a different state when it does, watching it move across the feeds on the clean phone with the specific attention of someone who spent 6 weeks preparing for a moment and is now watching the moment perform itself in the world without them. It moves fast. Faster than Wren estimated. The ripples become waves, and the waves become the kind of coverage that cannot be managed through the usual channels because the usual channels are named in the file and the naming is now public, and public naming is the one thing the usual channels cannot process without becoming the story themselves. Your personal phone has been off for 31 hours. You turn it on. 114 messages. You look at Colonel Marsh's name in the list. You don't open it. You will open it eventually. The conversation it contains is one you owe him and that you will have when the legal framework Wren is built is solid enough to have it inside rather than outside. You think about 11 ounces. 43 pages. The postal scale in the copy room at 4 in the morning. 6 weeks of camera gap mapping that felt like something other than what it was, and that turned out to be exactly what it was. Preparation for a moment you had already decided to create before you understood you had decided. The file is with Wren now. Its contents are public. The names are visible. What the names do next is not in your control and has not been in your control since you put 11 ounces in a courier bag and walked to your car in a parking structure in Virginia and drove north into the dark. You order coffee from the motel's front desk. You sit by the window. Outside it is an ordinary morning in an ordinary town that doesn't know you are in it. The coffee arrives. You drink it. You look at the phone. You look at the window. You think about what something being about actually means. Whether it means the institution or the thing the institution was supposed to protect. Whether 9 years of the former was always preparation for one night of the latter. Whether the recruiter in Ohio would recognize what you became as a version of what you were trying to become when you walked through his door. You finish the coffee. You pick up the clean phone. You call Wren. You say what comes next. She tells you. You listen to all of it. Then you say all right. You say it the way you say things when the decision is made and the direction is set, and the only remaining question is the walking. You start walking.